All right, guys and gals, I wanted to go over a file that came across my desk because it's actually a really good example of something I see brokers do all the time. They get a decline and that's it. They move on to the next deal. But I'm looking at this file and thinking, there's still some opportunity here. The business did almost 23,000 last month. Revenue's going up. This guy has a food truck. He has a physical location he's trying to get open, but he still got declined. So I wanted to, show you why, he got declined, and more importantly, wanted to show you what I think of the file and what the affiliate missed on this opportunity. Now, once again, if you're just doing this on the side, you're sending deals using your affiliate link. That's cool. Just send it over. You don't need to dig that deep into this file, but I do work with a lot of people who try to do this business full time. And the better you are at underwriting the file, the less time that you'll waste, and you'll be able to see what other income opportunities there may be. So because if you can't get somebody funded today, also, that doesn't automatically mean that there's no money to be made. So, and it definitely doesn't mean you should, throw the lead away. So let me show you what I'm talking about. So looking at the numbers here, March starts off with 10,356 in deposits. Average balance was 760. He ended the month with 898. Then we get to April. April was around 8,100. Average balance was about 1,100, but he only ended with $244. Then in May, about 7,800 in deposits. Average balance was $336. The ending balance was 339. So if I'm looking at this file right here, I'm not excited about it. Revenue's dropping, balances aren't there. There's not a lot of money staying in the account. But then you see in June, he brings in over 17,000, so he basically doubles his deposits. Average balance comes out to about 1,400. That's better, but he still ends the month with only $240, $243. Then we get to July. He brings in 22,944. So now that that gets my attention because you're looking at a trend there. So May, it's about 7,800. June, 17,000. And then July, 22,900. So something is obviously happening with the business. It's moving in the right direction. But his average balances in July were only $977. So and he ended the month with 653. And that's where the most lenders are going to have a problem. So now let me give you the story. And that's why I always say you can't just look at one number on a bank statement and think that's the whole deal. So the story behind these numbers, the guy has a food truck. He also secured a physical location that he's trying to get open. So he actually has the location. He's working on his food truck, which is sitting in the front of the location. He just doesn't have the money to actually fix up the business on the inside. So a couple months ago, he got sick. That obviously hurt the business. Now he's doing better. And we look at the statements, you can actually see the business starting to come back. So personally, personally, I don't hate this file. I don't like it today from a funding standpoint, and neither do any of the lenders that we work with. But I don't hate it as a future deal. So that there's a big difference because this guy, if he stays healthy, and his revenue keeps going up, eventually he's going to get the location open, and that's when we can see a completely different business in a few months from now. So, but right now, we got to definitely fix some things. So biggest problem, why he's getting declined now is money's just not staying in the bank. You can tell. Tell me all day that the client does 23,000 a month. Okay, great, but how much of that 23,000 is actually staying in the account? Because 23 comes in and basically 23,000 is going right back out. So where's the actual payment that he needs to make from any type of loan going to come from? So, and that's where underwriters are going to look at. So like I said, the guy did almost 23,000 in July, but the average balance was under 1,000. That's not a lot of breathing room. So he also actually has a stripe position. They're taking a percentage of money from him. Every day when he batches out. So that's another obligation that's coming out of the business. So now you're asking somebody else to come in and put another payment on top of that. That's tough for a lot of lenders. So yes, revenue's getting better. Lenders are going to like that, but he needs to start keeping some money in the bank. So now where I think the actual missed opportunity is a credit report was never requested from the guy. The client says it's somewhere in the low 500s due to medical bills. Once again, he was sick a few months ago. But I didn't see the report, so there's no way that I have any idea what's on there collection wise, late payment wise, if they're charge offs, whatnot. So I don't know because I don't have the report. So, one thing that you could do is, when you request a report, obviously you can see automatically that the guy needs credit repair. And if that's the case, you can offer that, credit repair option if you're working with a credit repair company or do credit repair yourself. So outside of that, there was no credit, but once again, there's no credit monitoring. So credit monitoring, you can make money off of that as well. So if you're interested in becoming an affiliate with the credit monitoring company that we work with, or the credit repair company, you can make a few $100s on the actual each and every deal, even if it's a declined deal. And then in the future, if they do improve their credit, then obviously with this guy's revenue continues to go up, we can actually get him a merchant cash advance. So that's pretty much it with this file. So like I said, there's a couple missed opportunities here: credit repair, credit monitoring. If he can get his credit up just a little bit, depending upon what's on his credit. Well, I'm assuming it's medical bills. Then and his revenue keeps going up, we can get him a merchant cash advance in the near future. And obviously, let's hope his business continues to grow. He's saying that he could easily do $100,000 a month. If that's the case, his credit's improved. A year or two from now, outside of the merchant cash advance, he could easily get into an SBA loan. But yeah, that's all I have for this one. If anybody has any questions at all, feel free to reach out. Thank you.